Hi everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. On today's show, I have the lovely Eliza Fricker, and she is an author and illustrator and an advocate and consultant for PDA, autism, and learning. She is the Sunday Times best-selling author of The Family Experience of PDA and Can't Not Won't. You might know Eliza for her Missing the Mark blog and later her Instagram and Substack pages. The Missing the Mark blog was launched in early 2020 when, amongst continued struggles with gaining support and understanding within the English education system, Eliza began documenting her frustrations and experiences through her illustrations. Eliza has published several books, including A Different Kind of Parenting and the acclaimed autobiographical Thumbsucker. We'll also be chatting about Eliza's latest book, Could Try Harder, which explores topics such as masking, girlhood, the hidden cost of being misunderstood, and about what happens when a person is taught all their life to perform instead of belong. So, Eliza, would you like to say hello?
Hi there, thanks for the intro. I like that. The could try hard a bit as well.
Yeah, I honestly think we're going to struggle to keep to time here because I have so many questions. Both like creative ones, but also like book ones as well.
Yeah, it's good to be talking to a fellow drawer, illustrator. I'm
Mhm.
excited.
I will be asking your favourite pen at some point as well. And so, where would be a good place to start? I guess we could start with a little bit of background to you. I know I've given a little bit, but maybe how the world of autism, etc., came into your life, sort of thing. I think that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I was fairly late, although I did speak to someone today who said that their parent was 73 when they got their diagnosis. So being sort of
What?
40, yeah, I know. I was really
Wow.
impressed as well that someone sort of that different generation was so open to that as well. I was pretty impressed. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess being in your 40s, early 40s isn't that old, but for me, that was a huge chunk of my life that I spent sort of feeling quite different and quite
Mhm.
outside of things. I was also talking in this meeting today about how I was a massive read. Well, I've always read lots, but comic books for me were really helpful because I felt like the graphic novel often had people feeling on like they're on the peripheries. So
Mhm.
that really helped me reading a lot of books of the graphic novel genre. But I didn't know what was different about me. I just had that sort of sense of difference.
Mhm. Okay, that's so interesting. I mean, also, like, I find, like, I class myself as late diagnosed and I was diagnosed at 25. So I can only imagine, yourself at 40 and then saying someone who was like 73, like, it's kind of wild what is late?
Yeah,
Everything feels late.
yeah,
um,
that's really interesting, isn't it, in itself?
yeah.
What is late? Because for all of us, I think we have a back catalogue of experiences that were potentially sort of impacted with that lack of knowledge
Mhm.
about ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's a lot of sort of talk now around sort of self compassion, isn't there, about sort of being kinder to yourself.
Mhm.
And I do actually think that's really important because part of getting that diagnosis is the understanding of yourself and letting yourself off the hook a little bit, really.
Yeah, I think it's hard to be kind to yourself, but I think you kind of have to be after diagnosis because there isn't a lot of help. Like,
No.
I feel like it's kind of like down to us, sort of thing. And so, did you have a like NHS assessment where you want like a waiting list kind of thing, or were you able to like do it privately? Like, how did you find the like assessment experience?
Yeah, I was quite fortunate because through my work, I was offered it through a more
Oh.
neuroaffirmative place. So I didn't have to pay and I also didn't have to wait. So I was very, very lucky. And up until that point, I'd been um, self diagnosing, if you like, sort of. I
Mhm.
probably for the year or so before had been sort of getting to a place of acceptance that I probably was neurodivergent.
Mhm.
Um, and that was partly through the work that I'd started doing around missing the mark. And when I was speaking to people that were in that sort of area, so people who were also autistic or neurodivergent,
Mhm.
there was an ease to that communication. And for me, communication can be quite clunky. Whereas when I was speaking to these people through work, there was an immediate ease to that. And they were autistic, and a few would suggest, do you think you might be, or have you thought about it if, your
Mhm.
child is? And I just started to feel more comfortable to think about that first of all, and then eventually accept it. But I suppose prior to that, with my daughter's diagnosis, I had that's when actually I'd really ramped up my own masking going into those meetings, because I could see it didn't open the doors of sort of inclusion or acceptance for her.
Yeah.
And I think basically my nervous system felt quite terrified going back into that school building, not
Yeah.
understanding then what I know now about the impact that actual school environment had on myself.
Mhm.
Um, but I had that sense, this isn't a safe place for me, and I need to literally put that mask on. And so going forwards to meeting these people through my work, it felt a much more comfortable place and a safer place to start to sort of be able to show that sort of honesty around my own self and vulnerabilities a bit more.
Mhm. Also, that's wild to hear that, like, in order to like advocate for your daughter, you were having to mask and suppress your own, kind of struggles just to get through these like meetings in order for her to hopefully, or sometimes it sounds like, not access like accommodations and support and stuff. Like the fact that it was detrimental to you whilst you were trying to advocate for your daughter seems just mad.
It was really, honestly, probably one of the most difficult times, because obviously I'm trying to get that support for her, because,
Mm,
I'm her mother and I'm passionate about advocating for her. But at the same time, I was in a space that put me into that place of a really ramped up people pleasing,
mhm,
which is, you are elevated when you're doing that. It's a survival technique, but it's an elevated one, and it's certainly not a sustainable one. And I would go into those meetings really, really masking,
mm,
really, really people pleasing, and I wouldn't know what they had said. I couldn't remember anything from those meetings.
mhm,
Um, and also I didn't have the knowledge either that parents seem to have now around, what they do know. We have a lot more access to information. This was quite a long time ago now.
mhm,
um, so it was absolutely terrifying. There's a complete loss of control of my own self and what was going on, really.
mhm. And you kind of mentioned as well a bit about your own kind of struggles in school and coming back into that environment, which I can only imagine was like sensory hell. But maybe we could chat about like your experience within kind of primary and secondary school within the UK. Like, how did you find your own like education experience, and can you kind of look back on it and maybe see the like autistic struggles?
Yeah, I think I found the social element. I would probably say that I appeared very sociable in school, but it was actually quite a difficult thing to maintain that. So I think for me, appearing sociable has been probably part of the act, if you like. And I felt like that was a big convincing act, as if I could appear likable and sociable, but it didn't always work. I had quite difficult times within that as well, sort of, being picked on or bullied. Um, had quite distressing sort of fallouts with friends, and even, with teachers as well. There were a lot of misunderstandings
Mhm,
alongside that. I guess because, it's not a path chosen, but in a way it is. I guess that meant that this appearance of ability to socialize, actually there was a lot of confusion and distress around that. And
mhm,
I found that environment of going into school was a utter pull and detachment from an environment that I was happy and safe in, which was home. I found it completely alien to go into this other environment, whereas for me, home has always been this sort of safety that I always feel really comfortable in. I'm never bored. There's millions of things to do.
Mhm.
I'm totally comfortable. But then to be taken into this other space that wasn't mine, that smelt weird slash disgusting, children would touch your pens. I had a real thing about the kind of
What's that about?
just, it's just that, when other people touch your stuff,
Yeah,
you
100%.
know, and
Mhm.
it was like, this is mine, and now it's been soiled. And
Yeah.
trying to hold, I guess it's that holding on, isn't it, to things that are yours and that perhaps have that link and attachment to home and your safe space,
Mhm.
and then them touching them,
Mhm.
it was completely ruined, wasn't it? It was like,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
I
and
can think of many scenarios. Like, I think someone broke my pencil case once and I was beside myself. And I
yeah.
didn't really know why, and I probably now do, but
And do you think
oh,
you would have shown that in school, that you were beside yourself, or would that have all been
no.
at home?
My parents would have got that when they
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
me come in the door.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there was a sort of, that's that kind of, Emma talks about it she's a psychologist and she wrote the afterword to Try Harder, and she talks about this, how it creates this sort of misattunement in ourselves, because we have this self that we have to present, and
Mm.
that pleases other people, that
Mhm.
is acceptable to other people, but then we've got the other side of us where, in our safe place at home, that is the distress and the meltdowns and the frustration and the spikiness and all those things.
Mhm.
um, it's a very difficult one even now, I think, at times, to get our head around, because we are rewarded for being nice, pleasant, easygoing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it takes I don't know if you ever get to a point where you're not, maybe one day I will be that crotchety, authentic lady with my sholly down the high street. Maybe they
Yeah,
are the authentic people, the
maybe.
authentic women, not trying to kind of please others.
Yeah, and I definitely think that is like a real autistic thing, is just being like a chronic people pleaser. It's just, I think it's years of masking as well. If you're like undiagnosed, like it's so hard to unlearn that once you've been in it for so long. So yeah, I aspire to be just, totally unmasked old lady with my trolley. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever completely
Yeah.
get to that place.
Hmm.
Although I found, actually, I say that, I found, certainly in terms of like interacting with people now, there
Hmm.
are certain people I just can't do it with anymore. And I think that maybe is a kind of coming back to my actual self, that I don't, whereas before, if people were difficult, I would have ramped up my own masking to make that easier. Whereas
Right.
now I kind of don't do it. I just can't do it.
Hmm.
Maybe that is a kind of coming back to our real selves a little bit more.
Hmm. I guess also like that, like knowing how to say no and like protect
Mm,
your own space and time, and I guess mental health as well. Like all of that is a lot to figure out
yeah,
all at once.
yeah,
Yeah. Something you mentioned. So I guess we were like talking about kind of, how you mentioned how home is this kind of like safe place, and also I know that kind of it's called EBSA, isn't it? Emotionally based school avoidance.
yeah,
And I know it's kind of impacted not only your personal life, but also like your professional life too. Um, and you mentioned your daughter and her diagnosis and kind of the struggles there. So, how has that been, kind of having like to navigate that kind of school system again, and with your own daughter, like how how have you found that? And it sounds like already you've kind of said it's a struggle, but yeah, I'd be interested to know what it's like these days.
yeah. You will also hear my dog snoring in the background, by the way, which is this
Amazing.
added sound effect. Um, Late afternoon slumbers by the dog. Yeah, now it's we're in sync. I like to use that term quite a lot, in sync. So
Mhm.
I'd say like when preschool years were really, we had nice times, and I saw her exploring the world in her sort of, before nursery school, and then literally sort of from nursery school and through till the beginning of secondary school,
Mm.
it became a very, very difficult time with a child who was very, very, very fractious, very stressed, and eventually very shut down. And meanwhile, I am trying to get support for her, not knowing what I wanted, or what I wanted from that support, or what even that support could look like. Um,
Mhm.
and again, I do think there's more sort of knowledge about this now, which is amazing, because at the time when we were going through it, there wasn't. And so
Mm.
I didn't even know about sort of alternatives to school, or that, there were other learning environments, or that, you could home educate. There were, I live in quite a progressive and alternative town, and but the only people I knew that home educated, it seemed like it was sort of a lifestyle choice, and not
Mhm.
one that I kind of at that time had really considered. I suppose because with that sort of not knowing so much about my own self, or it being clouded during that time, other people's voices were sort of louder than my own. So professionals during that time were saying, she will learn to get on with this. It's just, some kids take longer to get into school, but she will. And she had friends as well at school, so that kind of, they would often say, well, she's got friends, and she enjoys playtimes. And so there was a lot of confusion at that time. um,
Mhm.
and that just clouded my instincts and my judgment, really.
Mhm.
And so when the choice was sort of taken away, when she had her breakdown and couldn't go to school, that, as well as being an incredibly difficult time, was a time that we could then start to repair and connect again. Because what happened, and that was probably the hardest part, was I could see my connection with her being lost.
Mhm.
Because when you're trying to get a child into school every day, and you've got this narrative of other people, you've got to get her in, she'll get used to it,
Mm.
you're not really seeing your child. Those other voices become louder in it, and through that, I'm not ashamed now to say that, that connection with me and her was lost. And so when she was unable to go to school, that was the time to sort of repair and connect. And
Mhm.
now I'm, I don't want, I'm not glad she went through that, but I'm glad we had the opportunity to have that repair and connection, because it's allowed us to find our own selves through this. And those
Mhm.
other voices as well have quietened, because our own voices kind of came back as well. And your instincts as a parent come back,
Mhm.
um, when they've been lost.
And did you find as well this had an impact on like your own mental health, not only your daughter's? We could chat a bit more about how that might relate to pathological demand avoidance as well. But how do you manage that when you yourself are autistic and potentially struggling as well? The fact that you're now describing the both of you being in sync is like lovely. It'd be interesting to understand the process to get to that point.
Yeah, I think, I'm an internalizer, or was an internalizer. So um, I think this is why so many of us, that term resilience is such a tricky one, because actually I would say we've got too much resilience. We're able to cope with too much.
Mm.
And I have, so when I am in a very stressful place, it's usually that I've got to a point that I shouldn't have got to. I've almost been able to take on more stress than I should have been able to, and mine comes out in quite kind of physical manifestation. So I have quite extreme vertigo attacks,
Okay.
and that happened quite a lot during that time with my daughter, um, and you, you there's an element you have to keep going, because it's your child. You can't stop. But being having that forced hand of stopping, probably saved both of us, because then we were able to do things very differently. And it's still probably, I'm so used to how life is for us now,
Mm-hmm.
that I forget that it probably still is quite different. There's still key milestones that sort of remind you that you're on a very different path. But I don't think they don't, I wouldn't say they don't matter. They are reminders, but I really see a lot of those sort of key milestones that parents celebrate, mainly sort of getting through school and doing exams. I really do see them now as false anchors. I really don't see what they prove.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who myself was, an A grade student, I just don't see what they prove. I think they're validation to the external world, but in terms of sort of your wellness and your fulfillment in life, I think they're quite meaningless.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've always thought that about like exams as well. Like, as soon as you get to the next stage, no one's going to look at your 11 GCSEs. They're going to look at your A levels. And then as soon as you get to uni, they're not going to look at your A levels. Why are we like doing so many? And like, I just think it's for show, isn't it? It's for, oh, you're on to the next stage. Good. You're on to the next like
Yeah,
milestone.
and who's that for? Is that for the schools?
Exactly.
Is
Yeah.
that like, I don't know if it's sort of, when you go through what we've gone through as late diagnosed, I think, we're celebrating other things like understanding ourselves, being able to put boundaries in
Yeah.
place, and
Yeah.
those are the things we think should be, we should be covered in certificates for doing
I
those
know.
things.
Honestly, like, and also like I recently in September I went like freelance as a graphic designer and illustrator, but it took me 10 years to realize that I could actually not work full time and work freelance and actually still be okay. Like,
Yeah.
I thought I had to work in an office. I thought, I don't know why, but in order to, be part of the world, I thought I had to be, in all the time and stuff, and that that was not the case.
No, and I bet your productivity is still good, or
Yeah.
even more than.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know if you like kind of found that as well in terms of like your own career. Are you're a freelancer as well?
Yeah, so I just work on my books, my commission work and
Hmm.
training now. So I think the last proper job, as I call them, was I worked in the marketing department for a gallery,
Okay.
and I did that. Gosh, I don't know how long ago that was. My daughter was still at primary school, but I was working there a couple of days a week, and that was to, do you know what? I honestly went for that job to prove that I could get a job. It's a
Mm,
ridiculous thing, but again, it's that sort of where you're quite harsh on yourself, and I thought,
hmm
I need to prove that I'm employable, and I got this job, and it was, like I said, 2 days a week, and
hmm
I found it utterly exhausting. um, Having to talk to people all day, not really doing an awful lot of work, if I'm being honest. That's what I remember about doing a proper job, is like there's so much not really doing work, or people trying to get out of doing work.
Yeah.
You're not you're not
Yeah.
you're not personally invested in it.
No, exactly. Whereas with your own work, like I feel like I can lose hours and I'll be like, oh, I should probably have a
No,
break now.
because it's your passion and you love doing
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And but I used to get the train home from this job, and there were a few people that lived where I live, so we'd get the train together, and
Hmm.
they'd all be talking, carrying on conversations, and I'd be absolutely smashed to bits. Like I'd
Hmm.
literally, trying to hold this conversation, and they would get off the train about 15 minutes before me, 20 minutes before me, and I would just stare out the window. And I
Hmm.
was absolutely exhausted, and that was 2 days a week doing that job, but it took
It's
so much
mad.
of me. Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it? What we like. I don't know. I don't know if "put yourself through" is the right word, but what you think you ought to put yourself through, like to be somewhat normal. But I don't think normal exists.
No.
um, yeah, I feel like that could be a whole podcast episode in itself, to be honest. um, I feel like we should talk about your books. Um, where do we want to start? Do we want to cover previous books? Do you want to talk about your latest book? What order would you like to do things?
Um, well, I guess we could start with the first book because that's
Hmm.
quite interesting because that's the family experience of PDA, and I was actually asked to write that, so it wasn't. Sometimes you can go, you can pitch an idea to a publisher, but
Mm.
they actually contacted me and
Okay.
asked me if would want to write a book about PDA, and I was like blown away, like really, like, how's this, you know, um, but actually, like you said earlier, when it's something you're passionate about and it's your interest, it
Mhm.
wasn't as hard as it seemed, because you're writing about something you're really interested in. And I felt really passionate as well that I wanted to write something about PDA that wasn't kind of telling parents what to do. I think like a lot of parenting books like tell you what to do. There's almost like a formula to parenting.
Mm.
And when you're parenting differently, um, you need that sort of reassurance around that. So I felt like actually having these sort of vignettes showing day to day life was a really nice way of kind of giving people that insight and maybe hopefully them feeling like it resonated with them.
Mhm.
And I also wanted something that was accessible, quick to read, because I know how many things I get sent to read, and often they're massive. And
Yeah.
realistically, am I going to read them all? Probably not. So I wanted that accessibility, this quick, easy read for parents, and it still does really, really well. It's probably one of the books out that I've out of all the ones I've done that sells really well.
Mhm.
And I hope it also makes people feel a bit more hopeful as well, because when I when we went down that kind of route of trying to explain PDA to sort of different professionals and schools and things, you could see people almost sort of balk at it. They were really like, oh, we can't take kids like that. It was always really gloomy. Like I
Mm.
remember this one parent in one of the numerous coffee mornings I got sent on, and she started talking about her daughter who had PDA, and this is way before I knew anything about it.
Mhm.
And she almost got shut down in this meeting, in this coffee morning. There was almost this hushing her down, like, let's not talk about that. And I thought, gosh, that sounds awful. I hope my child doesn't have that. I honestly
Mm.
thought that, because this woman's level of distress and the fact that it wasn't even allowed to be talked about, I just thought, what is this thing? Gosh, that sounds
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. And I don't think it is that at all.
Mhm.
When you get the environment right. So that was the other thing that I kind of wanted to offer parents, sort of hope with it, and even just having a conversation, because I know tons of people talk about PDA now, but at the time there wasn't so many conversations about it.
Mhm. And I also think it's very, like a lot of things, is very misunderstood in that people think that it's like a behavior thing,
Yeah.
something you can grow out of.
Yeah, well, I suppose it would have probably at one time, those kids with a PDA profile would have been thought of as being kind of oppositional and defiant, wouldn't they?
Mm.
Or they
Yeah.
kind of understood it. And often when I speak to families, they they are really worried. One of the big things that comes up is they say, "Will it always be like this?"
Mm.
And if you have a child who is deeply distressed and stressed, and showing those sort of and that kind of manifestation of it with really controlling behavior, and lots and lots of overwhelm meltdowns, that's not a person with PDA. That's a person who is living a life that's not made the adaptations they need, basically. And
Mm.
if and that's the other thing about it. It's often talked about, it's very complex need, and um, it it is, but it also isn't, because once you make those adaptations,
Mm.
you might not even see a lot of those meltdowns.
Mhm. Yeah. It's all about like the approach and actually talking about these things, isn't it? I
Yeah,
feel like I can understand the whole sort of, I don't know, like school playground mentality or like coffee morning mentality where it's like it's, easier not to talk about these things.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm glad your approach to write a book like that's. It's also nice to hear that it can happen both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it because I know that you like illustrate your books as well. Like if you're doing everything for a book, is that like quite overwhelming in terms of like you got to do the words and the images? Like how do you balance that sort of
Yeah,
work?
it's a mixture really, because I'm quite fortunate because I also get to just illustrate other people's books as well. So
Hmm.
I get the kind of, I get to do that side, which can be great.
Hmm.
Obviously I don't illustrate books if I don't sort of like them or they don't align or, chime with me.
Hmm.
Um, and then it's also nice to have that kind of full autonomy of doing my own stuff as well. Um, it's getting what's difficult at the minute is because I am busy is getting that headspace to do my own stuff, because I mean you'll know this, that like yes, 20% is putting that pen to paper, but 80% is thinking about it,
Hmm.
and that space to do that is getting harder to find because I'm
Hmm.
busy. So that's tricky sometimes. I sort of sometimes think, oh God, am I going to lose my ability to do my own work and think for
Hmm.
myself? And and then if I get like that, then I have to sort of get quite strict on myself and do some like early starts and not look at emails and
Hmm.
get on with doing some drawing and writing for myself. It's
Hmm.
just always hard to get that balance, basically.
Yeah, and also like I find it tricky as well. I don't know if I imagine maybe you do, but like when you're being like commissioned or like you've got to do that work, but also like it pays, whereas the work you do yourself or
Mm,
like your social media and stuff, like yeah, it could kind of work as a portfolio sort of thing, but you're not, like you need money to live sort of thing.
yeah, well, that's the difficult thing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be lovely to like off to do some gong bars and just drawing for 6 months, but the
Yes,
reality is
yes please.
it's really expensive to live.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if that sort of, maybe that's something still to explore. Maybe it also kicks in with that kind of, high achiever thing of not saying no to stuff. Maybe that
Mm.
is, another element to it. But yeah, I think when you're self-employed, you're always worried that you're going to lose money,
Mhm.
and you've got to strike while the iron's hot with this stuff. So it is really hard to get that balance.
Yeah, and it's hard to just like keep up appearances on
Mm,
like social media and stuff, especially if you're like creative. I feel like I kind of get into the like, oh, I haven't posted in a while, and then I'm like, that's probably not a good enough like reason to draw. Like I should be drawing, what I want to draw, not for social media. If that
yeah,
makes sense.
that's a horrible, and I think that's really horrible, and that creeps in because
Mm,
I think for us to do really well with what we're doing, I think we have to feel it, and like that passion has got to be there. So when we start doing it in that way, when we start thinking we've got to do it, it never
yeah,
works as well, does it?
no, it's just not. It's doing it for like not the right reasons. um, yeah, I think if it's tricky as well because for me, like I really enjoy like drawing, just like other things, not sensory and autism related, um, but like finding time for that as well. Like when your job is also the thing you love doing normally as well, like carving out time for it still as a hobby and things. Like I think it's all a balance. It's still a great job. I don't want
Yeah.
to put anyone off it.
Yeah, I think it is always, and I think you've always got to kind of look at things and try and assess them all the time as well. So,
Yeah.
I've got some ideas that I want to work on, and, they're not a million miles away, but it's a slight pivot, if you like.
Hmm.
And it's just trying to do that pivot while you're still being pulled back into this old space as well, where,
Hmm.
I'm not going to knock that. My work is established in those areas, but I'm like, I want to start moving and developing these other bits, but it's finding that time and
Hmm.
yeah, it's just difficult to do that.
Also, I do worry about like kind of, when you might want to take your style in a different direction, like what. like what are people like here for? Like, are they
Yeah.
here for your style? Like, if you change your style, will they be like, oh, you know, what's she doing? She's not doing her normal like sort of style. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really easy to get in your head about it all.
Well, it is because you work on your own. And actually, I've recently started, I've got a virtual assistant a few days a week, and that's made a huge difference because I
Mhm.
can, I've got someone to talk to. I can talk to my agent about the book stuff, but you realize how often it's just you in your own head. So having someone else you can talk honestly about your work with is really helpful because it's all on our shoulders most of the time, isn't it?
And I kind of feel like when you do talk to someone that like gets it, or is like another, you know, creative or someone you're working with, like it kind of is like a problem halved sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, actually, I'm making out that this is really, you know, a big thing when actually I just needed
Hmm.
to talk it over with someone.
Yeah.
um, yeah, like having a sounding board almost.
Yeah. And I think social media is a very difficult one. I had a meeting with someone today and we were chatting about it. And, um, I'm fine. I'm finding it increasingly difficult to engage with it. I just
Mm,
find it's, I do have to use it, but at the same time, I'm finding the AI stuff, like the amount of
yes.
stuff that I read is just so flat. I can tell, like,
Yeah.
it's just, AI. And then this whole thing, like, there's less and less, like, nice images. There's less and less like illustration. There's like AI created images or people's faces because I think there's something around the algorithm that if you post your face, then it gets more
Okay.
traction. So
Right.
mine's just full of people's faces at the minute, and it's
Hmm.
getting a bit boring.
That's the thing. You like, I feel like it's going away from being like more about like personal hobbies and stuff. I feel like like Instagram when it first started, it was very much like people like documenting their lives, whereas now it's just a curation of like best bits. So it's
Yeah,
hard not to compare yourself to people that are, you know, posting all the time. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm very glad I didn't grow up with it.
I know.
Kind of 17, 18. So that was, yeah, a good thing, I
Well, I've
think.
just been rewatching Girls because I read the Lena Dunham book, and
Mhm.
they're like very involved in. I can't remember what year it is. It might be sort of. I don't know actually. I need to look that up. What year it was made? But they're really into Facebook and they use Facebook Messenger all the time.
Okay.
It's quite interesting.
It's weird, isn't it? How, I don't know, it just, social media gets like replaced or built upon. And now, like, I don't know if you feel this as well. Like I feel like my Instagram helps me to like, you know, get to a wider audience, but it does help me to get work, like in terms of like a kind of portfolio of images.
Yeah.
But it's also like I wish that wasn't the case so much.
Mm, yeah.
I wish I didn't have to like keep it up.
And interesting,
um,
there are people that don't use it. Like
mm,
I was, what did I hear? Is AD Smith? She's like amazing. She's like, the idea that you wake up in the morning and you go straight on your phone and you look at your phone. She's got no Instagram, and you're like, she's an amazing, successful writer. So maybe you don't need to use it. But then
mhm.
I'm not ready to take that plunge.
Yeah, it's scary when like if you're a freelancer as well, you kind of you want to be everywhere that you can be in order to be seen.
Yeah,
Like, please employ me.
yeah.
uh, and so I know we talked about your first book, but with your next book, did you kind of decide to write that yourself? How did that come about?
So the next book was actually Can't Not Won't. So that was the illustrations that I've been sharing on the
Hmm.
Missing the Mark blog, and I'd been sending that. Actually, I had been quite active on sending that out because I was really angry with the school systems, and I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
people need to know this. And it got tons and tons of rejections. Um, and then when it was published, it was a Sunday Times bestseller. So that's quite interesting in itself that it got
Hmm.
rejected so many times. Um, And then obviously it's something that resonated with tons of people. So I think that's quite interesting, that maybe people in the publishing were like, oh, that's not going to resonate. And actually,
Mm.
there's tons of parents or families that are going through that.
Mhm.
And so that was the next book. So that was a sort of culmination of Missing the Mark's illustrations. And I was, blown away that was a Sunday Times bestseller, particularly when
Mhm.
we were going through it ourselves of sort of school anxiety. We were sort of felt like we were the only ones that were going through it.
Mhm.
And obviously we weren't. And that was actually quite immediate from posting. When I started posting the stuff from Missing the Mark, people were interacting with it almost immediately and saying, this is us. Obviously, we hear now lots of stories about other families going through it, but I don't think anyone has sort of really posted about that stuff, or certainly not
Yeah.
illustrated it anyway.
Mhm. Yeah. Isn't that amazing though? Like, I also feel like when it's you approaching publishers, like you have to kind of prove there's an audience for it and prove like, that like marketing wise, like it's viable and things like that. When actually, like if it's a topic that really resonates, like it's so tricky to have to like tick boxes for something to be published, sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, so I'm glad someone took a chance and
Yeah.
and it paid off that massively. Like how great is that? Because yeah, I do
Yeah,
think.
and for other families saying, I still get messages about it saying, this is us. Like, how
Mhm.
have you been in our house? This is our life. And I think,
Wow.
that's what you want from any bit of writing, isn't it? To create
Mhm.
that resonance and connection for people,
Mhm.
and people to
Yeah.
feel less alone with this as well, because I think shame is a big part of this when you feel like you're the only ones going through it.
Yeah, it does sound really isolating as well. Like also, especially if you're a neurodivergent parent or carer, like yourself, like you might already be a little bit more isolated in terms of the other parents and carers that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine just reading a book and knowing that you're not alone. I think it's
Mm.
just all like a sense of community, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's why I started my own like stuff, just to be like, is there anyone else? Is there anyone out there?
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
but
well,
yeah.
that's it, isn't it? I think that's a good starting place, like thinking about what you want that isn't there as well.
Yeah. And it's not like that big an ask, is it? Like, I'd like to know another autistic person in real life. Like that
Yeah.
shouldn't be such a huge thing, but it's easier to find online than it is in real life.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. um, and so we did second book.
Shall we talk about the latest one? Could try
Yeah,
hard.
let's do that. Otherwise, this is going to be a long podcast because you have too many books. Yeah, where did you get the idea for this book?
So I'd written Thumbsucker, which was about my childhood,
Mhm.
and I'd base that, each chapter was around names that I had been called, or things, words that had been said about me.
Mhm.
Um, and then I sort of used that to kind of unpack those and how they could, how those things could be misconstrued and what was actually going on for me. And then with Could Try Harder, I wanted to follow that up with the teenage years, and just the complexities really of that, as you are kind of assumed to be at a stage. There's this kind of assumption when you go to secondary school, like you're ready, you're ready for this.
Mm.
And that was kind of the basis of it, really, is this idea that that people assume that you're at this point and you're okay and you're ready and you're prepared, and I was none of those things at all.
Mhm.
And they were deeply affecting times for me. um, Even, going to a friend's house and she was physically developed and talking about, kissing boys and stuff. I was just
Mhm.
watching this, like, wide-eyed, and very quickly realizing this is expected of me because she's the same age as me, but not
Mhm.
feeling ready for any of this stuff. Um, and so yeah, it was really difficult to write, actually, because I think your teenage years are obviously, you kind of remember them more than you do your childhood in a way. There's a sort of distance with your early childhood.
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
something about the teenage years where I think it's so impactful because it's the first time of doing things that are sort of adult-ish, and that's serious, serious to get into relationships with people. um, it's serious about your what you do in regards to your schoolwork, because you're told it's going to impact your future. And I felt that sort of pressure enormously,
Mm.
about what was expected of me, basically.
And they make out that there's only like one career path that you
Yeah.
can solidly take for life.
Yeah, I remember telling my career advisor that I wanted to be an archaeologist or an animator, and then just looking at me completely blank faced.
I mean, that's not gonna inspire you, is it? That's just gonna make you think like, oh, am I not capable of like,
Yeah, or that kind of thing of like, oh, I'm really different. I said something stupid, you know?
yeah, but then, like those are solid career choices. Like, what's wrong with those? But I feel like some career advisors knock the kind of wind out of your sails sort of thing
Yeah.
when it comes to like, I want to be this. Um, but I think we should be able to aspire to things. Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure careers advice at the age of like 16 is a great
I mean,
idea.
it's so abstract, isn't it? Anyway, now
It
when you think
is.
about it.
They make out like it's like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? It's like, I'm 16. I can't, I'm still a child. Yeah, it is. It's kind of wild, the pressure, especially like secondary school. Like, you're right. Like, you kind of go from like your last day at primary school playing in the playground and then learning that at secondary school people don't do that. It's only the boys.
Yeah.
And like overnight you're kind of in a totally different environment. It's such a weird concept. Why do we do this?
I don't
um
know. And it's also like massive as well. So secondary school, they're always
oh
huge.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's crazy.
yeah. And it's just, you're suddenly in this place with all different kinds of people. Um, I just felt like it was survival. I just felt like going into that, and that's probably what I felt, like I said earlier, that was the kind of feeling that came back going back into those environments for my daughter. You go
Mm.
in and you're like, oh my God, I've got to get through this. This is
Mhm.
going to be a lot. This is a lot, and I've got to get through this. I cannot imagine what it was doing to our nervous systems.
Yeah, exactly. I actually I went to a sixth form college not that long ago, just to like be part of a workshop, and they were showing me they have three different like themed sensory rooms, um, and I was like, oh my god, like these students might actually grow up to be regulated adults. I was like, this is wild. Like, and also like it's not groundbreaking. It's separate quiet rooms that are themed, and you can just get away from things, and each student has their own kind of box full of like fidgets and other like sensory aids and stuff, and I'm like, this is not rocket science. Like,
No.
this is so easy to maintain and to do, and actually potentially they might not come out of the education system with mental health problems,
Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure that's what did it for me.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's just to see someone doing it and it working so well is so lovely
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah,
Um,
and just hope that that keeps evolving, really, and that keeps
yeah,
progressing. And hopefully lived experience as well plays a huge part in this, of sort of listening to people's experiences of those environments. And I
yeah,
think people just assume because it's a numbers game and everyone goes to school that that environment is quite a benign one, when we
hmm
actually know it's not. um, and for me, going, the library was a place that I felt I could regulate in, like the smell of books, looking at books.
hmm
My mum was a librarian. We had a lot of books at home. It was something I understood.
hmm
um, and so that was a place. I even do it now if I'm a bit stressed. I'll go to like a bookstore, just have a little walk. sounds.
That sounds great. And
Yeah,
also, if you can go like in the middle of the day when it's quiet because you're a freelancer, like
yeah.
would recommend.
I have to say that is one of the best things about being
Yeah.
a freelancer is we can go and do errands, town, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
when everyone else at work, and
Mm-hmm.
we have the quiet to do it.
Honestly, it is life changing to be able to like just do appointments during the day, let alone like nice stuff like going to bookshops and things. But yeah, it's much less chaotic places in the middle of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that sort of, I think there's a lot of talk about routine for autistic people, but I prefer sort of rhythm. I've always found it really hard to be kind of stuck in something. So stuck in school every day or stuck in a job every day. For me, it
Mm.
works much better to have these like rhythms and flows through the day. So I, might work. Usually, I tend to work most productively in the morning. Then I have a big chunk in the day where I go and do other bits,
Mm-hmm.
and then I might return in the evening, and
Mm-hmm.
that works for me because I can choose when I feel like I want to work. That's when I'm going to
Yeah.
be best able to work.
Mm-hmm. And also, I feel like as a kind of like being in a creative profession, sometimes you need to get away from your work and come back to it fresh and be like,
Yeah,
oh, right, now I kind of see another way of looking at this sort of thing. Like, I
yeah,
feel like you can get quite close to stuff and
yeah.
like it's healthy to step away every so often.
Yeah, it
um,
really is. You need those breaks to sort of,
mm,
yeah, take a bit of like time to reflect on it and then go
mhm.
back to it.
And talking of creative professions, we haven't spoken about illustration-y things such as favorite stationery,
Yeah.
pens. Do you work digitally, analog? What do you how do you work?
I tend to draw it out first myself.
Mhm.
My favourite pen, which is a Uniball Eye fine liner,
Nice.
nothing super fancy, and then I scan them into the computer and I tidy them up and I colour them in, and I always use sort of grayscale for that.
Mhm.
Um, my friend joked that who I've written a few books with, when one of our books came out, she bought me a pack of crayons and said, maybe you can start colouring in for your because it's such a everything I do is grayscale. So yeah, and that's sort of how it works for me. Is sort of I remember when I was like, I don't know, I was probably like 15, and my dad's an illustrator and artist and a painter artist now.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, but when we were kids, his bread and butter was he was a political cartoonist, and he's like very traditional, so pen and ink. And
Right.
this is like back in the day, so they had like he would. I was remembering this the other day. He would get a fax come through from the newspapers, so we wouldn't be allowed
Mm.
to go on the phone. Waiting for that call. The fax would come through, and then he would work, and he would often work like really late at night after we went to bed, and
Mhm.
he'd do pen and ink, and then a courier would come and pick that up and courier
Wow.
it over to the newspaper office because we didn't have anything digital then. It's amazing, isn't it? And
That's
he's always saying,
wild.
"Yeah, it was really good when you were a teenager, and like I'd be waiting for a call from like the editor of the Guardian, and you were on the phone, and I'd shout, 'Get off the phone!' and we'd be like, 'No, it's really important,' because we were like gossiping with friends." So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's that sort of using for me like for years I because I used to say to my dad like I don't have a style, and I was like 15 drawing all the time. He's like, you won't, it'll just come, your style. No, like I want one, like you've got a style, like
Yeah.
you know and I used to really as a teenager beat myself up about this, and obviously over the time he's right, it just develops, doesn't it, the more that you do.
Yeah.
But I used to be really kind of grumpy about that, and it for me it was still quite late because I was doing sort of more. I used to do sort of screen printing. I sort of did various things, screen printing, and I do sort of designing wallpapers and things. So I
Mhm.
probably didn't have that opportunity that I had doing this stuff, where it was really kind of fine tuned it into, what it is now.
Mhm. That's so interesting, isn't it? Like, I definitely get that about the style. You just want people to be able to recognize you as you, but without like having your name next to things. Like I feel that's like the true like like exciting moment to be recognized for your style is like such a big compliment, I feel.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I know that artist like just from their style. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing better than that. I definitely feel like you have that. Like I know it's your work. Like no
Yeah.
matter if it's you're posting it or I'm seeing it elsewhere. Like it's your style is just so you basically.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is why people love it. I'd be interested to chat to you about your podcast as well. Like, how did that come about? Because yeah, you've clearly done this before.
um yeah, that was, I think that was still in my early days where I still had quite a kind of lot of like rage and frustration at the system itself. And the
Mm,
thing that was kind of still really prevalent for me was this idea about kind of diagnosis, and that we often go down the route of diagnosis for our children,
mm,
um, where we hope it's going to bring this support and it's going to open doors. And I think I felt quite hoodwinked, if you like,
mm,
because I didn't I it didn't bring that for one, and it kind of narrowed the lens as well within that sort of education school setting. And also, it wasn't something that my child had been autonomous in. It's very different for us when we go down that route and want to sort of explore that, and we can, even if we have the funds or the we can even choose kind of what way we go with that diagnosis, who we get to do that diagnosis. But our children don't. We
mm-hmm.
with the hope that it brings something. And so I felt quite miffed by it all, really. And so, you know, I also I also really struggle with this sort of term special educational needs as well. You know,
Mm,
I don't really sort of see myself, my child, people in my family as this kind of. I just feel like it's quite othering within that school system, and I think that
yeah.
many of us can thrive, as we've just said, being self-employed. We can find ways that work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And within that school system, none of it really made sense to me. All of it kind of jarred. It wasn't, getting a diagnosis so we can do all this, self-exploration. It's not like that for a child.
Mm,
And I think it's rough for a lot of kids because they want that sense of belonging as well. And I think all of that is achievable if we had a more flexible education system, but we don't question the education system, we still question the child, and that doesn't sit well with me.
mm. And I know that's something you raised like in your podcast. It's like how many children are being disabled by the system and not their disability. Like
Yeah.
that in its own is such a good like discussion point. Because like I mentioned, like it's seeing places that are doing it well. It's not wild changes to school buildings and things like that. It's like simple accommodations really that I think go the furthest, and also just understanding staff, and nice children, not mean ones. Ideally. um, yeah, I feel again there's so many things that could be their own podcast within this. But yeah, what is your podcast called, so we can push people towards that again?
It is just called Missing the Mark. Memory blank, but it is just called Missing the Mark.
Okay, fab. I will link that in the show notes. Maybe we should also mention like where people can get your books and your social media and all of the things.
Yeah, so Instagram is still the place to find me. So
Hmm.
if you just put in Eliza Fricker _ Missing the Mark, you'll find me.
Hmm.
Um, and my website is missingthemark.co.uk. So there's links on there. And actually, it's quite exciting. I'm having my website updated at the minute. So I'm
Ooh.
putting on there you'll like this. I'm putting like different illustration resources so that people can download them. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, sort of like different sort of theories and sort of psychological kind of theories that that I found have been quite helpful through this. So I've done one on the window of tolerance. There's one on the power threat meaning framework.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that um, everything those psychologists have done that I align with, not at all. It's just these sort of
Yeah.
things I found. Just to be clear here,
Yeah.
you should put that caveat in this world that we live in at the minute.
You
Um,
really do.
but these things that you find along the way, like I've put the Lundy model on there, that I think are quite helpful and maybe quite good resources that parents can share as well with professionals to kind of explain sort of how they're doing things, where they're at, and yeah. And
Oh,
so
cool.
there's a few little, like, I've made some little booklets as well that people can download, so they'll be up there soon. So that's quite exciting to give those offerings to people. Again, things I think like would have helped me when I was going into those meetings to explain,
Yeah.
you know.
So will you post about that when you've kind of got it?
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
should be
Cool.
in the next week or so.
Oh,
So then
amazing.
I'll be sharing those. Yeah.
Cool. And I kind of want to like close the podcast with like, how are you? How are your daughter? Like, how are you guys doing generally? Like, you said like near the start of the podcast, like you're in sync. And I think that to me says everything. But, has your daughter come out of her shell and become the person she was before, all of this?
Yeah, I think that's a nice way of saying it, actually. I think that's where we're at with it. I think, what she was before that those school years impacted is definitely where she's at. I think she seems very comfortable with herself, and one thing I'll say about people with a PDA profile, age is on your side, because the older you get, the more autonomy you have. So the more you can choose that life that works for you, and that's where she's at now. That she's able, she's making those decisions for herself, and that works really well for her. And I'm, like I said, I'm her parent, but I'm just a little guide on the side, and less the guide on the side, because she's out there doing her thing now. So that's really nice. And yeah, it's just quite peaceful and calm, really.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. I'm glad that you've kind of, been able to like get her old self back, kind of thing. Because I feel like a lot of educational settings can drum that out of you. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. And yeah, there's so many things that we could continue to talk about, but
I know we could do a separate one on stationery, separate
yeah,
one on work, a separate one on
yeah,
yeah.
there's not enough time.